I live with my wife in a house, and we have about a half acre of land total. There's a garage that is attached to the house where I store a lot of my things. We also have a lot of neighbors, and all have about the same size houses and yards. It's pretty common for people to have yard sales during the summertime. My wife and I had one a few years back, but it's not something that we do a whole lot. But living in a large neighborhood, sometimes we'll go and check out the ones in the area. Last year, our neighbors just down the street were having a yard sale. The man who lived there, Dave, had always been decently friendly with me, and I'd spoken with him several times. We were not good friends or anything, but we had been to each other's places once or twice. I know that Dave gave me a hand when I was working on my car at one point. His wife was also friendly with my wife, so when we saw they were having a yard sale, we decided to stop by and check it out. Their yard sale was going on over the weekend, and on Friday afternoon we walked on over. I saw that they had a bunch of things out in the driveway, and also many things on some tables in the garage as well. So we were checking out the sale, and we got into the garage area. I noticed that there was a really nice tool set for sale. It was the same kind as the one that I had, and that's why I noticed. I picked it up and looked at it. But when I did, I noticed that it had this sticker on it, just like mine. And that sticker was not originally on the box. I had put it on the bottom of it. I put it on several years ago just as a joke. This had to be my tool set. I thought back to the last time that I had used it, and it had been a couple of months. My garage had a lot of things in it, and it was not super cluttered or anything, but it did have a decent amount of stuff. I put it back and didn't want to accuse Dave of stealing from me or anything. He was talking with someone and didn't notice me looking at it. I kept looking at his other things for sale. I also noticed that he had a digital air filler for sale, which was just like the one that I had. I figured that he just happened to have the same one, but the thought of that being mine did occur to me. I also noticed him having two other things that I had in my garage, and I was getting suspicious. My wife was now talking with Dave and his wife, and I went over and joined in. However, I did not bring up him having the same things as me, and I wished him the best of luck with his yard sale. Then we walked back over to our house. On the way back, I told my wife about the things. She said that I was crazy, that there was no way Dave stole from us. But I knew that sticker was only on my tool set. I was lucky I noticed those things at all, because they had quite a few items for sale. After we made it back, I went straight for the garage and looked through my things. I could not find my tool set anywhere, and I also couldn't find any of the other things Dave was selling that I also had. I honestly couldn't believe it. I would have never suspected Dave would steal from me, but I didn't know how else to explain it. The next day, I went back over to Dave's sale. He had sold a couple of the things that were mine, but luckily the tool set was still there. That was also the most valuable, and he was selling it for $75, and I had bought it for like $200. I brought up the tool set to Dave and confronted him. He denied everything. He said that I must have lost my mind and he would never steal from me and blah blah blah. When I brought up the sticker, he did not have an explanation, other than he got it as a gift, and whoever gave it to him must have put the sticker on it. He seriously expected me to believe that it was a coincidence. I said that I was taking it back, but Dave said that I couldn't have it unless I paid the $75. I should have just took it, but I put it back and then left. I walked back home and once more looked through my garage. The things still weren't there, and I know he stole them. After that, I decided I didn't want anything to do with Dave anymore. We stopped being friendly with each other. I wondered how he had gotten the things from me without me knowing, but I would always leave the back door to the garage unlocked. My neighborhood is quiet and usually very safe. The door opened to the backyard, which was fenced in. I just never bothered to lock it. Dave probably knew this from when he was in my garage. I don't know how, but he did. It creeps me out to think that he entered my garage sometime and stole from me. This happened back when I was a kid. I believe that I was about 7 years old or so. Back when I was young, I really liked to go to yard sales with my parents. Sometimes my mom would go to them and get things for really cheap. And I would always look at the toys and kids stuff, and found some interesting things usually. I remember I once found a PlayStation for $5, which was crazy. But anyways, I went to this one garage sale with my mom and sister. There were actually a decent amount of other people there, and there was tons of things. We started looking through stuff, and I soon wandered off from my mom and sister because I wasn't interested in what they were looking at. I remember that I was looking through these video games sort of about halfway down the driveway. This woman came up to me when I was doing so. I looked up at her when she approached, and for some reason I thought that it was her garage sale. She said hi and asked me what I was looking at. After I told her, she said that there was a box at the end of the driveway, and I could have something for free from it. Some yard sales would have a free bit, which was usually old Happy Meal toys or random things that they didn't want. So I figured that's what it was, and the lady was trying to be nice. We walked over there, and she asked me to pick something out. There was a lot of stuff, and it wasn't bad at all for a free bit. I looked through it for probably like 2 or 3 minutes. The woman was just kind of standing there, and was sometimes pointing stuff out to me and asking me if I wanted it. Finally, I picked out this Hot Wheels car and told her that's what I would take. She then said that I needed to take it to the car now. I can't remember if she gave me a reason or not. If she did, I don't remember what it was. But looking back on it, it seems like kind of a weird thing to say. But I know that she said something like that, and for some reason, I didn't think much of it. I was still under the impression that it was her yard sale. So I started walking over to the car, which was parked on the side of the road and a little ways down. It was a quiet residential street, and with the other people at the yard sale, there was probably about 4 or 5 other cars parked. When I made it almost across the street, the lady grabbed my hand. I thought she must be extra safe crossing the street in case of cars or something. But it felt weird because I was old enough to cross the street on my own, especially one this quiet. However, that's when I heard somebody yell from back up the driveway. It was my mom, and I looked and saw she was waving for me to come back to her. There was also another woman like halfway down the driveway that was also yelling. For a moment, I was very confused, but then the lady let go of my hand at like the same time as this. She moved away, and I watched her get into a car that was already running and parked on the side of the road. I remember seeing that a man was driving it, and after the woman got in, the car quickly drove away. I went back to the driveway where my mom and this other lady asked me all about the situation. I told them my side of the story, and they said that the lady was not running the sale. It was the other woman who was with my mom. She had seen me arrive with my mom and sister, and noticed the other lady with me at the free toys. When she left with me, the woman had a bad feeling about it and asked my mom if she knew that person. That's when they started yelling at me. I know some people might say my mom shouldn't have left me alone, but at all the yard sales we had been to before, nothing like that had ever happened. If I didn't 100% believe that that woman ran the sale, there's no way I would have trusted her or went with her. Plus, my mom was occupied with my 5-year-old sister, who is usually way more of a handful than I was. The sale was crowded, and after that, I obviously wasn't let out of my parents' sight for a long time. I feel lucky that I made it out of that okay, and I'm glad that I didn't go any farther with that moment. A few years ago, we had a garage sale at our house. I live with my husband in the suburbs, and being in a large neighborhood, we decided to have the sale after cleaning out the house. There were a lot of things that we didn't need anymore, and wanted to see if we could get any money. With anything that didn't sell, we would just go and donate it someplace. So we went through everything and organized stuff, and set it up in our garage and driveway. We were selling quite a few things. Our garage was normally very clean and empty aside from the car and a few other things. There's a fridge in there and a lawnmower and those kind of things, but there was plenty of space to set up folding tables and put things on display that were for sale. Plus, in case it rained, we could move everything into the garage to stay dry. So we had the sale over a weekend, and luckily it did not rain. The weather was great and a lot of people showed up. My husband and I took turns sitting in a chair at a table and acting as a cashier. I remember that at the end of the day on Saturday, we had sold quite a bit of items and made more money than we thought we would. At about 6 p.m., we were done for the day. I stayed at cashier as my husband drove and picked up the signs for our sale. We had put one sign at a busy street corner nearby, and another a little bit closer directing people to our house. He then took out the sign in the yard, and we just had a couple of people still there looking around. When they left, we started to put everything back inside the garage. We were going to be open for just a few hours the next day to see if anything else would sell. After we got everything back inside of the garage, we closed it and went inside. It was a normal Saturday night after that. Several hours went by, and my husband and I were in the living room watching a movie on the couch. Out of nowhere, we heard a door open and shut. I had no idea what it could be, so we got up and started walking over towards the noise, which was in the kitchen. When we went over there, I remember seeing this guy for like a split second inside of our house. He then went out of sight of the area of the room that we could see. Then we both moved back and away in the other direction. My husband and I both ran to the other end of the house and went into our bedroom and closed the door. Then we called the police. It happened so fast, and the only thing that we knew was that some random guy was in our house. How he got in or anything, we didn't know. I remember sort of hearing the guy walking around the house on the other side, but we went into the back corner of the bedroom and then into the connected bathroom. We just wanted to get as far away as we possibly could from the guy. So the police were on the way, but the guy was still inside of the house. It was a terrifying moment, because we didn't know if he was dangerous and what he wanted. Possibly he would try to come after us, but we didn't really hear much of anything over the next few minutes. It felt like forever as we waited for the police. In that time, we didn't really do much, other than listen and try to tell where the man was. The police finally got to our house. They searched the entire place and found a man hiding in our basement. He did not give a reason why he was in our house, but it didn't take long for us to find out that he had entered through our attached garage. I realized that he must have been at the garage sale. He simply hid inside of our garage and out of sight. None of us knew he was in there. Then, when we went inside, he could walk right in. We typically did not lock the door leading from the garage to inside our house, because the garage doors outside were always locked. I thought of the garage as almost like another room in the house, and didn't feel the need to lock it. Obviously, that all changed after this event. I'm not sure what the man's plans were. He may have thought that we had gone to sleep and was going to try to steal from us or something, because he had been inside of the garage for hours. I'm just glad that he didn't try to harm us and that the police found him. I live a little bit out in the country. It's a quiet area, and most people have a little bit more land. So I remember that one Saturday late afternoon when I was driving home, I noticed a yard sale sign. It was very unusual to see yard sales in my neighborhood. In fact, this was probably the first one that I was aware of since living in the area. So I was curious and decided to drive over and see what was for sale. It was a little bit later, so I wasn't sure if it was still going, but the signs were still up. I followed them, which led me to a street that was only about a minute from my house, but I had never been to before. There was a very quiet street, mostly surrounded by woods. The second to last house before the end of the dead-end street was where the sale was, and the house had a large front yard. But there was also a very long and kind of narrow driveway to the left of the house. After the driveway, there was a little open area of grass, and then there was a dense woods beyond that. There appeared to be items for sale in the grass between the driveway and the woods, but I didn't notice anybody there, and there were no other cars parked on the side of the street. Still, I thought that I would check it out, and I parked my car. I then got out and started walking onto the property. When I got past the driveway to the grassy area, many items were lying on the grass. There was a lot of smaller furniture, like lamps, mirrors, nightstands, and some other random things for sale. I looked around, but did not see anybody at all. I wondered where the owner was, if they had gone inside or ended the sale or something. I thought about just leaving. It was about that time when I remember I heard a noise coming from the woods behind me. It just seemed like a person. The noise didn't really seem like it would be an animal. I looked over and thought that I saw a man moving from behind some trees to another set of trees. The woods was dense, so I didn't see well at all, but there did appear to be a man there. Was this the owner of the sale? I couldn't help but feel kind of creeped out by this. Why would he be in the woods? After not hearing any noises for a few seconds, I started walking away. It didn't seem like I should be there anymore. So I started walking to the driveway to go back down it. When I made it about halfway, I heard more noise from the woods behind me. I looked over my shoulder and saw a man emerging from it. He was looking at me and started to walk in my direction. At first, I kept going, but when I made it to about the very end of the driveway, I turned around and stopped. The man was still looking at me without any kind of expression on his face and was walking towards me. I asked him if this was his yard sale. When I did, the man didn't say anything at all. He also kept walking towards me. It was really weird. So at that point, I continued walking to my car parked on the other side of the street. I got to my car and went inside, but when I did, the man had now made it out to the street. I quickly drove away and went home. The whole thing seemed kind of odd to me. But just a few days later, I read on Facebook that a man had been caught in connection to an assault in the area. He looked like the man that I had seen at the yard sale. When I read the story, I found out that apparently he argued with a homeowner having a yard sale. I guess he was trying to rob him, and the guy with the sale didn't want to give him anything. So the man punched the homeowner and started to beat him. The owner of the sale was able to run away into the woods and escaped into a neighbor's property. When I realized this, I also realized that I must have gotten there a very short time later. I feel lucky that the man didn't chase after me. A few years ago, I moved into this one neighborhood. I was living alone and renting a house because I worked in the area. I no longer live over there, but I remember the creepiest thing that happened when I did. So a few weeks after I moved into the house, one of the neighbors had a yard sale. The street that I lived on had quite a few houses on it. I hadn't met any of the neighbors yet, and nothing strange had happened to that point. So the yard sale was at the house directly across the street, and then one house to the left. I'm pretty sure it was a Friday, and I walked over from my house to the house where the yard sale was. There were a few other people there, and the house belonged to a lady named Ruth. I talked to her for a short time when I was there at her yard sale. As I was in her front yard looking through her things for sale, though, I noticed the house next door. This would be the house directly across the street from mine. Inside one of the windows, I noticed a man looking out of it and staring at me. It was a little weird, and I looked away. I continued to go through the things for sale. A few minutes later, I noticed the man was still in the window staring at me. It was really strange. Soon, though, I picked out a couple of things to buy. I went up to Ruth and we talked briefly, and she was really nice. I told her how I had recently moved in. Then I left her yard and I headed back over to my house. But when I was crossing the street, I couldn't help but notice that the man was still looking at me. He was at another window now, though. I found this to be really odd, but I just went back home after that. And a few hours later, which was the early evening, I noticed out my front window that the man was now outside in his yard. He was kind of walking around, and I noticed him looking over at my place a few times. This was starting to seem really odd, but I just tried to ignore it. I didn't notice the guy for the rest of the day. That night, though, I woke up at 2 o'clock in the morning. The first thing that I heard was a knocking on my front door. I had no idea who it could be, but when I got up and looked out of a window, it was my neighbor from across the street, the same man who had been staring at me. I had no idea why he would be here at 2 a.m. I was definitely not going to answer the door. I stayed near the front area of the house. The guy knocked again and then finally walked away. I looked through the window carefully and saw him go back inside of his house. I was very creeped out by this whole thing. The next day, the yard sale was still going on, so I went back over to Ruth and decided to ask her what she knew about the guy next door. She told me that he had a criminal history and he was a really sketchy guy. I then left and went back to my place. I was more worried now about why the guy was at my place at 2 a.m. But over the next few days, I didn't see him at all. I didn't really think much about it anymore, until one night there was another knocking at the door very late. It woke me up once again, and I knew this was probably the same guy. I got up and looked out of the window again. He was there, standing right outside of the front door. When he knocked another time, I obviously did not answer, and I made sure that he couldn't see me. I hoped that he would walk away again like before. This time, though, he did not. He stayed by the door for a while, and then he finally turned and I thought would walk away. But instead, he turned to the left and walked towards a window. I quickly moved out of the way. He then came to the window and tried looking inside. At that point, I couldn't take it anymore, and I called the police. The guy stayed at the window for a short time, and then moved to the side of my house. I could no longer see him, and just hoped that he wouldn't break in. I didn't hear or see anything until the police got there, though. When the police arrived, they found the man walking into my next-door neighbor's yard. He claimed that he simply had the wrong address and was going to a friend's house. It didn't make any sense because he literally lived across the street. He went back to his house, and I was nervous something like that would happen again, but thankfully it didn't. The guy only lived in that house for about another month and then moved. Where or why he moved, I'm not sure, but I'm really glad that he did. I still don't know what his plans were,